Hello, good afternoon. I'm Terry Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News. And Harlem Network News is a new media platform. We started at the onset of COVID, and we are still here. Harlem Network News is a new media platform. We began at the onset of COVID, and at that time, we knew it was extremely important to assure that everyone really was able to just get all of the information that was going on. It was very clear to us that our community, the Harlem community, and the Harlems of the world were just not getting clear information. And it was initially pertaining to COVID. People were walking around because we did not see any people of color on television when they were speaking about COVID. So, Black people were like, oh, I'm Black, I can't get it. And then suddenly, we were inundated with all of the deaths and body bags and overload in the funeral, home. So it was just that for me was a clear, reference to media being covered, people in neighborhoods understanding what's really happening. And also, I mean, COVID was bad and is bad, but I feel that it really pulled the scab off the wounds, so that we could really, really see what all the disparities were. And then, of course, there was Black Lives Matter and, horrific murders of Black people that happened live on television, which is very interesting, actually. Gil Scott-Heron is a classmate of mine from Lincoln University. So it's always like very clear and critical, when he said the revolution will not be televised, it will be live. But that was years ago. So it's live, it's televised, and that has saved lives and brought great awareness. Today, I have some very, very special guests with me who are going to just share a bit about their background. They have an incredible film that, from my knowledge, premiered at the Film Forum here in New York. The title of the film is Jeffrey Robinson's, and I actually have Jeffrey Robinson here. It's Jeffrey Robinson's Who We Are, a chronicle of racism in America. We also have one of the filmmakers with us, who is Emily Kunstler, and her sister, Sarah Kunstler, could not make it today, but Kunstler, for me, is a household name. I grew up during the civil rights movement. I was like bused. So that was like a name that you always heard. And I had the fortune of coming to see the film because one of our Harlem activists and national activists, Ms. Sharon Salam, who is the mother of Yusef Salam, one of the exonerated five, invited me. And I know that the father of Sarah and Emily was very instrumental in, helping to have this case become exonerated, and that was William Kunstler. So Jeffrey Robinson, would you please introduce yourself to our Harlem audience and our Harlem of the World audience in the world, and let us know who you are and whose you are, and a little bit about the lectures and what you do and your background. So thank you.
Well, first, thank you for having me on this platform, and thank you for having this platform and doing what you are doing with it. My name is Jeff Robinson, or Jeffrey Robinson. My mother called me Jeffrey, and so most people call me Jeff. I am 65 years old, and I am the CEO and founder of the Who We Are project. I knew I was going to be a criminal defense lawyer from the time I was 11 years old. And that's what my goals were from that very early age. And I went to Marquette University and to Harvard Law School. I had one of the best educations in America. and I embarked on a 34-year criminal defense career. I was a state public defender, a federal public defender in private practice. And I went to the ACLU in 2015 as a deputy legal director because I felt I wanted to do more than what I could do with individual cases. And in March of last year, I left the ACLU because I felt I wanted to do more in the area of educating America about our true history, about a history that has been erased, a history that has been hidden, but a history that has been hidden in plain sight. And that is the extent to which America relied on so-called white supremacy and anti-Black racism to found and furbish this country going forward from its very inception. That's what this film is about. And I made the film because I wanted to change, to be one of the voices to help change the narrative that answers this critical question. Why does America look like it does today when it comes to the gaps between white and Black America? Gaps that have persisted throughout the history of this country, gaps that are almost identical as they were more than half a century ago at the quote unquote end of the civil rights movement. Why does it look this way? And if we don't know the truth about our history, we can't answer those questions. And if we don't answer those questions with the right answers, we will continue to take 2 steps forward and 3 steps backward, like we have through America's entire existence. So I formed the Who We Are project with Sarah and Emily. We made this film because we are going to be part of the conversation that is going to change the narrative about our history. George Orwell said, "Who controls the past controls the future," and the past needs to be unlocked.
Okay, well, thank you very, very much for sharing. And because this is Harlem Network News, and we consider ourselves, and we are the voice and drumbeat of Harlem. We also, one of our mantras is knowledge is power. So I never want to just like skate over things. I want to make sure, what is the ACLU? Okay, our audience needs to know that and understand that. So if you could just break that down and your connection to that. Thank you.
The ACLU is over 100 years old, the American Civil Liberties Union. It is based nationally in New York City. It has affiliate organizations in every state in the country, including 3 in California and Puerto Rico. And the ACLU is an organization that has historically fought for civil liberties and civil rights. The reason I went there is that they have a part of their legal department that is devoted to reform of the criminal legal system and the pursuit of racial justice. And that's why I went to the ACLU, because I thought I could work on those issues on a national level. And that was very attractive to me. And then I left the ACLU, not because that work wasn't important, because I knew there were criminal justice advocates around the country who were more than prepared to step in and do my job and even do it better than I had done it at the ACLU. So I wasn't afraid of leaving, but what I felt compelled to do was to address this issue of education. It is the one foundational piece that has been missing from every single attempt that we have made to address the issue of anti-Black racism in this country in 1967, and people just don't hear it enough. Everybody likes to quote Martin Luther King saying, "I had a dream," or "I have a dream," and judge me by the content of my character, not the color of my skin. Few people have heard him in 1967 say, at many points, that dream has turned into a nightmare. And it's turned into a nightmare because America isn't willing to do what is necessary to solve these problems. So I think understanding our past and how our past led to this very moment in American history is critical if we are going to go in the right direction.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing. And certainly everything that is happening right now that, particularly I mean, things have been happening forever. And I'm Terri Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News, and we are a new media platform. We're on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Clubhouse, HarlemNetworkNews.com, and soon to be on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, so that more viewers have access. But it's a very, very critical time. So many, many things have happened to really just make some of these issues and the need front and center. But I would love for Emily Kunstler to introduce herself and just give us a little background of who you are and whose you are, and what brought you to this project, and a little bit about your background. I'm always enamored with people's background and what their life path has been and what they have done, because I also think that's education. I think that a lot of people don't really, students, people coming out of school, even going to college, they don't know the full array of what you can actually do in this world. So I always want people to share what their journey has been. And especially now, it's not a time where you just are at one job and at the end of it, you get a gold watch. It's not that anymore. So go right ahead, Emily. And of course, you can speak for your sister, Sarah, since she was unable to be here. And I think it's great that you all did this project collectively. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Terri. It's really an honor to be here with you and on your show, talking to your viewers. I'm Emily Kunstler. My sister Sarah isn't here. She's a practicing criminal defense attorney. So she's at one of her client sentencings currently. So she's not here right now. But we grew up, Sarah and I, with two parents who were civil rights attorneys. We grew up in the West Village in Manhattan, and in an anti-racist household, where we really thought that we got an excellent education from our parents in terms of the history of anti-Black racism in America. And we knew that in our lives, our life's work would be devoted to anti-racist work. We just didn't know what path that would take when we were young and coming up. Sarah became an attorney. She went to law school, and I went to film school. And one of the most important things that we learned from our father was how to control the narrative, how to speak to the media. He'd be the first person to say that all of his victories in the courtroom didn't happen in the courtroom; they happened in the court of public opinion. And
wow.
then inside the courtroom, there'd finally be enough courage to make a decision. So we combined our talents, Sarah and I, and in 99, 2000, we started a company called Off-Center Media. That highlights instances of injustice in the criminal legal system. Sarah and I make advocacy videos for people in prison, clemency videos for people on death row, and we've been doing this together, mostly short films, for the past 20 years. We also made, before this film, we made a feature-length documentary together called William Kunstler, Disturbing the Universe, that chronicles our father's life, the choices he made, the cases that he took, and sort of tells history through his life trajectory. Also included in that film is an interview with Yusef Salaam, who was a client of our father's. Our father took on Yusef's case in the appeals process. He unfortunately passed away before he ultimately saw Yusef freed, but he always believed 100% in Yusef's innocence and the innocence of his co-defendants. So it was a privilege to be able to incorporate Yusef into that. And Sarah, through her practice as an attorney, had the opportunity in 2017 to see Jeffrey speak. She has to take like all attorneys, continuing legal education courses in order to keep her license current and active.
Okay.
There was she saw, a listing for a free course at the federal courthouse in Manhattan, signed up and went expecting it to be, just as dry as every other course that she'd taken to keep her license current. But walked into this room, saw Jeff on stage, heard what he said, and was totally blown away. Despite the education that she thought we had, she realized that there was a lot we didn't know. And Jeff's the best teacher that either of us have ever had. So after seeing Jeff and having this really life-changing experience, she left and called me and said, you got to see this. This is amazing. This, I tried to take notes. I can't remember enough. I want to tell you about this, but I don't have the tools. This is like, everyone has to see this. And I'm like, okay, slow down. We tried to find something on YouTube. We found a little bits and snippets, but nothing really very satisfying. So we asked, but it was enough to show me that Jeff was the real deal, and that we really could help him get his message and the research that he had spent at that point, 8 years putting together out into the world. So we got in touch with him through mutual friends in Sarah's legal life, and met Jeff for coffee, and persuaded him that making a documentary would be a great idea. Having never met him before, it didn't all happen over that one coffee. But that was in 2017. A year later, we had Jeff on stage at Town Hall Theater in front of a sold-out audience of 1,500 people, recorded it with 7 cameras, and that was the first thing that we got on tape, and then spent the 2 years following traveling around the country with Jeff, collecting real life narratives that were inspired or from stories that he told in his presentations.
Okay, I think it's very powerful. I'm Terri Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News, and we are a new media platform, and I'm honored to have here with us today Jeffrey Robinson and Emily Kunstler. And Sarah Kunstler is missing from the picture, but she's here with us in spirit. Those are the filmmakers, and we're talking about a film that has premiered here in New York City, at least at the Film Forum. And I had the honor of seeing that film. And it is called Who We Are, a Chronicle of Racism in America. And that film is going to premiere tomorrow at the Magic Johnson Theater right here in Harlem. So, part of us having this discussion is to create awareness so more people know that that film is going to be there. It's extremely important. And we're going to work a little bit further because Harlem is a grassroots place. It's a drumbeat place. It's a word of mouth place. So, I just told them, hey, you've got to get to some of the churches like Abyssinian Baptist Church and FCBC, Convent Avenue Baptist Church, and also the Apollo Theater, which does do an educational process with Camilla Forbes. So, those are ways, and I will share also with our Central Harlem Community Board, of which I'm a member, Community Board 10, and then of course, Community Board 9, possibly our borough president's office, because one of the great things that has happened in New York City, and our former borough president from Manhattan, Gail Brewer, implemented this. But we now have our new borough president in the person of Mark Levine. But there is an office right on 125th Street. It is the North Manhattan Borough President's Office. It's a storefront. You can walk in, it's right there off of Amsterdam Avenue and 125th across from one of our large housing projects. So it's accessible to the people. That's a great thing. We also have a new council person, who's just 34 years old. And that is Christian Richardson Jordan. And her office is also street level. Her office, just to segue into some of the things that are happening, her office is across from the Harlem Y on 135th. It's a couple of doors down from the horrific, shooting that we had happen on 135th. So I think that those are places where, at least initially, folks could get tickets, and just become a part. So I think that's important, for this weekend, because one of the things that Harlem Network News is dedicated to is knowledge. We know that knowledge is power. It's something, once people have knowledge, you can't take it away from them. And I do think that it's extremely interesting, Emily, that you said you and your sisters knew you were going to do something in the civil rights, arena, given, that was the life dedication of your parents. It's what you grew up in, so you were going to do something. But I think it's very, very significant, the connection of media to political action, and just the fact, to paraphrase, that your father said a lot of the cases are tried, or knowledge comes about from the media. And that's very, very true. And that's why Harlem Network News is so important. We need the support, we need the outreach, we need the funding, because pretty much, at least here in New York, the Black media has been shot and killed. It's just pretty well flat. And that really makes a difference. Growing up, there was Ebony and Jet and, the Amsterdam, and, these are places where you got information, you got confirmation, and a lot of that is not happening. And even some of the stations that have been taken over are really not Black owned. And, not that it's a dividing line, but it's important that people tell their own stories. People know their own stories. You know what I'm saying? I cannot go and tell the story of a Hasidic Jewish person. I don't know that story as well. I have to coordinate with them. So these are the kinds of things that we're talking about. And in a 2-minute soundbite on, regular television, you're always not getting the full story. And a lot of times our stories just don't make the cut. There's not an interest, or, I don't know why, but that is exactly what is going on. So very, very critical. I think that's an important piece that you said. And, that's kind of been my life journey. I wasn't sure how I was doing it, but I know that I was going to write. I, have a background in media. And so, I just remember reading, I went to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, also to Fordham University. And I remember reading a very important book that was called Is the Media the Message, or the Message the Media, by Marshall McLuhan. And that's a big question, and it's a reality. So Jeff, do you want to tell us a little bit about the lecture and the class that, was it Sarah that came to? And also, we're always learning, I'm not an attorney, but I didn't know that, I know doctors have to keep on taking courses, teachers, I have done some substitute teaching. You got to take some classes to keep your license up, and you got to finally get your master's. But I didn't know that lawyers had to keep taking these classes. So thank you for sharing. So tell us a little bit about the kinds of lectures that you do, and where they are, and the premise. Thank you.
Well, back in 2011, my sister-in-law and my mother-in-law passed away in New York, and their 13-year-old son, my nephew, became my 13-year-old son. And my wife and I didn't have kids. And when he moved in, we panicked because there was a 13-year-old. And not only that, it's like I tell many white people about white privilege. It doesn't mean that you haven't gone through, trials and tribulations and challenges. It's just that take all those things and then add on being Black on top of that. And you get a whole different view. And I was terrified about what, this young man's future, based on everything I knew from being a criminal defense lawyer. And as I was looking for things to help me understand my own fear, I started reading things about our history that I had never heard before. I had never heard in college or law school, and I was shocked. I was angry. I felt ignorant. I felt, how could I not know this? I didn't grow up reading about the civil rights movement. I was in the middle of it because of when I was born. My older brother and I integrated a Catholic school in Memphis, Tennessee in 1963. So I had no excuse for not knowing this information. And when I finally forgave myself, I figured, well, I'll blame my teachers because I got to blame somebody. And then I thought, well, if my teachers weren't taught this information, how were they going to teach it to me? And it was so voluminous and so overwhelming that I was paralyzed. And as a criminal defense lawyer, I've been trained, take a large set of facts and put them into a timeline just to see what happens. And the top of my head came off because what I found was an unbroken line of anti-Black racism, literally from 1619 to the present, and not based on opinions or analysis, based on original source documents with Americans in colonial America and constitutional America telling you exactly what they think about racism, so-called white supremacy. And it was shocking. So I put this into a presentation and I was going around the country giving it. And I was giving it because I just felt the need to share it. I felt like, how many other people don't know this? And I wanted to get it to as many people as possible. So I did it when I was a criminal defense lawyer. And I did it when I went to the ACLU. And a lucky day was when Sarah Kunstler was in that CLE room. And, you know, I will say, Sarah and Emily came to me and said, let's talk. And I knew the last name for sure.
Yes, yes.
But I didn't know them. And I didn't know, like, you know, what does the last name mean to them? Or you know, how are they living that? I didn't know these things.
Yes.
So I had friends that knew Sarah, and that helped. And they're like, she's the real deal. And then it's one thing, you heard Emily say about their upbringing and being in an anti-racist family. It's one thing to talk that, and it's one thing to think that. It's another thing to walk that. The Who We Are project, as we get launched, is being funded by the money that Sony Pictures Classics paid for distribution rights to the film. How did that happen? Because when Sarah and Emily came to me, they said, this is your story, not ours. You own this story completely. They then came to me and said, you're not a filmmaker, we know that, but this is your story. You will have final editorial control over what goes in or what comes out. And so they were walking the talk of an anti-racist ally. And as we got to know each other and trust each other and work together, of course, it had nothing to do with like final control. It was like, what do we all think is the best version of this that can reach the largest number of people? And so that process was, you know, you said you couldn't tell the story of the Hasidic Jewish community. You would need to go to that community to deal with it. This is a story that I was telling, but it is a story of a history that has been stolen from all of us. This isn't Black history, this is American history.
Yes.
And it is on all of us, white Americans and Black Americans, to recover and reckon with this history. So when they came to me, and you know, I just want to go back for a minute to what you were saying, like, it's not that way where you like get one job and get the gold watch and, you know, what is a possibility of what you can do. I was a criminal defense lawyer. I never had any intention of making a film. I never had any intention of going to the American Civil Liberties Union. And I damn sure never had any intention of forming the Who We Are project when I was 65. But these are things that came, you know, to me as opportunities. And so, you know, what you said is so important, that your skills, can be used in so many different ways, and for the youth in our community and these young people to understand that they shouldn't be limited by anything. And so I was open when Sarah and Emily said, let's make a documentary film. I will say, if I had known everything that was involved when we made that decision, I would probably be a lot more scared, but I didn't know anything.
Right. You didn't know what.
Let's make a film.
You didn't know what you were getting into.
And then we got into it. But getting into it was one of the greatest gifts of my life, because the experiences that we had, I would get invited to give this talk. And so Sarah and Emily, would say, hey, that's an airplane ticket in the hotel room we don't have to pay for. Let's get down to that place and see Jeff give this talk and rent our 15-person van and meet members in the community after they've heard what we're talking about. And that's how we started going around the country, getting folks to talk to us to make this film.
Okay, well, I think it's very critical, some of the things that we're saying. I'm in your age range, Jeffrey. So a lot of these things I lived. My mother was a teacher in New York City, during the big teacher strike.
Right.
She was an activist. My father was a detective, and, he passed away like 1969, before things got really weird, for people that were police officers, and, I went to college, during the time, and high school during the time, of what I call change and revolution. I was also bused. And that was like a very, very traumatic experience. People talk about busing, and initially, when the busing happened, and that was supposed to be like making sure that all the schools were equal and not separate. However, in a New York City, and I think originally busing was supposed to bring like Blacks to white neighborhoods and whites to Black neighborhoods. But in a New York City, which is a different kind of racism than the South, like the busing only went one way. So you had Blacks traveling like an hour and a half, like on a bus, to a white neighborhood. I went to school in Jamaica Estates, like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, like cousin or something, was in my class. Jamaica Estates is like one of the wealthiest areas, in New York City. So it was just an experience, where instead of calling, we were elementary. So we were kind of mixed in with everybody. And, everybody got invited to, the whole class got invited to the birthday parties, but it was still an arena of stress for us as children. Like, instead of calling us the N-word, they like referred to us as, oh, she's a bus child. So, you always had this little stigma, and, the guidance counselor would call you in and see if you had breakfast in the morning, and, was it cold in your house? They would ask you questions that nobody else was getting asked. Right. And even as an 8-year-old or 9, you knew this wasn't right. So, this creates a lot of stress and trauma for people. And then, like you said, there's so much information that is unknown. And here we are in this time, and there's still information that is just unknown. And it's difficult to get the information out. You know what I'm saying? Just even in terms of your film promotion, getting people there, it's a difficult thing to get this information out. If something horrific happens, like shooting of 2 policemen, it's not difficult to get that out. And, that has to do with, systemic racism. In Black communities, mostly everything that gets reported is if it's some kind of bad crime. Other than that, like if you call, major networks and say, hey, I want to get on and have an interview and talk about, this great film, it's not going to happen. So we really have to look at that. And, today is a D-Day in New York City, quote, Harlem. President Biden is coming to New York City to meet with Mayor Eric Adams. Why is he coming? He's coming because of gun violence and because there was a shooting, which got magnified because the people who were killed were the police. Okay, so we have to really look at that because it's a very sensitive thing. Obviously, the police were of Black Dominican ethnicity. They were young. They were trying to do the right thing. But we have to look at this because of the other victim is the person who did the shooting, because this was obviously some kind of mental health thing where a mother who, I don't want to misquote, I think was a corrections officer, called with no option. Why did it get to that point? These are the questions that we have to ask. And also President Biden, Harlem Network News is asking you why you haven't been here before to New York City and Harlem, and why did it take shooting up police for you to come? That's a big question. We have a lot of
Can I just say that what you just said, she called the police with no option?
Yeah.
Why was there no other option? Because going back to 2017, the NYPD budget for 1 year was almost $5 billion. You can't tell me that a chunk of that money couldn't have provided services that would have given her all kinds of options. And this is why understanding this history is so critically important, so that you understand when people say defund the police or divest and reinvest. Even if you're thinking we need police at least for the immediate future, $5 billion a year, that's making a decision about what options that woman has. And it gave her one.
Yeah. So these are, some of the things that come up, because even in our previous administration, this is with Mayor de Blasio, a lot of money is spent going into some mental health fund that the First Lady was, administrating, as well as, another, like some kind of, program on race, which I don't even know who's a part of that. And a lot of money went into that. So we have to look at these things, because if you have someone in your family that has a mental health issue, pretty much, and this is how the structure is, like, if they're not a threat to themselves or someone else, like, they're not going to get any help. If they're an adult, they don't have to go anywhere to get any help because they're an adult and it's their choice. So half of the people in Rikers Island have a mental health issue. And even though they supposedly have mental health task teams that can come out, they can't come out and get anybody without the police. And they usually can only keep someone 48 hours. So most people try to handle their own situation, especially if they're Black or brown, because there have been instances, and this was not that instance. These were some young, innocent officers who came, to try to help. And they were put in a situation, as far as I'm concerned, that was out of a league that they could manage. You know what I'm saying? So, we have a lot to consider. And particularly in our Harlem community, we have a lot of drug problems. We have a lot of, mental illness, homelessness, and a lot of this really has an economic base. So, your film is connected to this. If you would like to just share a little bit about some of the scenes that you highlighted in the film and in the discussion, either person. Emily,
why don't you start?
Okay, sure. So the backbone of this film is Jeff's presentation that goes, from 1619 through today, and explores the history of anti-Black racism in this country. But some of the things that we added to the presentation, there's an interview with Gwen Carr, who's Eric Garner's mother. We actually spent quite a bit of time in Tulsa talking to local activists. And we had an interview with Mother Randall, who's one of the sole survivors of the massacre in Tulsa.
I'm sorry, I'm going to just interrupt you when you're speaking about Tulsa, the massacre in Tulsa. and Black Wall Street. Can you explain that? Because a lot of people really don't know about that. Just the past couple of years, like we've heard Black Wall Street, and that's because somebody did a play. So.
Sure, Jeff, do you want to do that?
Sure. The Greenwood neighborhood in Tulsa, Oklahoma was one of the richest neighborhoods in America in 1921. I said one of the richest neighborhoods in America, not one of the richest Black neighborhoods in America. There was oil money, there was land money, 4 square miles, 35 blocks, a thriving Black community with maybe 16,000 people. On May 30th, a young Black man was accused of assaulting a white woman in an elevator. Even the newspapers from the time were like, yeah, it doesn't look like anything happened here. But he was arrested and a lynch mob formed. The issue was that there were many Black men in the Greenwood neighborhood who had been veterans fighting for the United States in World War I, and they were home. And they still had their rifles and their military training. So they went down to the courthouse and surrounded it. They didn't break anybody out. They kept the lynch mob out. And there was a cost for that. May 31st and June 1st, the entire neighborhood was destroyed. 4 square miles, 35 blocks. White people got airplanes. They took burning balls of turpentine and dropped them on the roofs of Black homes and businesses. And when Black people ran out into the street, they were gunned down. Mother Randall, that Emily mentioned, is 107 years old, and she spoke to us about her memories of that day, one of which included seeing bodies lying in the street and thinking, why are people sleeping in the street? Until an adult told her, no, they're not sleeping, they're dead.
Wow.
This massacre was essentially wiped out of American history. Nobody ever heard about it. And people, and if you go back 3 or 4 years, you can probably triple the number of people in America that hadn't heard about it, because it has only recently become part of the national discussion. And the reports say, oh, the first report's 30, 40 people, then 300 or 400. And what we learned in the making of this film is that there were 4,000 people who were not accounted for. And just last year, the last 2 years, they discovered evidence of mass graves in Tulsa. And they started to investigate and dig those graves up. And the mayor decided, well, no, we're not going to do it anymore. We don't need to know anything else. And they just stopped it. Literally, they just stopped it.
Yeah.
So this is an incident in American history that we are just confronting right now, where if this had happened in a white community, you would have heard about this in every history book, this horrific, horrific loss of life and property. And yet we are just reckoning with it now. The fact that we didn't know it doesn't mean that it didn't happen.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry, Emily, just to interrupt you, but I just think it's important, you know, that I'm a filmmaker, I'm a media person, you know, that's who I am. But I also, you know, have in my lifetime, as we've done many things, you know, been like a substitute teacher. And I always remember like talking to students, having them read. And, you know, I was in a New York City high school right on City College's campus. And, you know, I realized at that time, and this is like 20, 30 years ago, that a lot of the students really were not reading. And a lot of what was happening is like, we're reading something. And then I started doing like vocabulary words and, you know, realizing that people were scanning over the words and what they didn't know. You know what I'm saying? And that's a dangerous thing, you know, because they're reading and they're listening, but they're really not getting the comprehension. So I don't want anybody, I'm Terri Wisdom, this is Harlem Network News. I want people to understand, you know, and be armed, you know, so that they can really deal. So I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to you, to just speak about, some of the
Sure.
events that the film highlights. Thank you.
Sure, and I should say that if those that did hear about Tulsa before recently had heard about it as the Tulsa race riots, right? Which is
Yes.
almost worse than not hearing about it at all, because it
media
it categorized it as something totally different. So I'm glad that we got to include the real story of what happened in the Greenwood community in our film. Some of the other people we spoke to Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, whose brother Terrence Crutcher was murdered in Tulsa by police officers there. It turns out actually that Dr. Tiffany Crutcher has ancestors who were in Greenwood during the time of the massacre. And she herself didn't find out about what happened in her own community until she was in college. That's how hidden and buried that history was. That people growing up still in Tulsa, taking classes about Oklahoma history, mandatory classes about Oklahoma history, would still be denied that knowledge. We also spoke to a woman named Jo Bowling McCall, whose father was lynched when she was 5 years old in Lowndes County in Alabama. And she erected her own memorial to him at the place where her family had a store. It's similar to Tulsa in the sense that one of the primary reason that her father, Elmore Bowling, was executed, was assassinated, was because he was a successful Black man in that community. He had a gas station and a store. He had a farm. He had a company that transported farm materials and milk, I believe. And they were a very wealthy family in that community, and white residents couldn't stand it. So we had a chance to talk to Jo Bowling McCall. We spoke to Senator Hank Sanders and Judge Faya Rose Touré, who are activists in Selma, and we're working to rename the Edmund Pettus Bridge and to redefine what that meant. Edmund Pettus, Jeff can tell you maybe a little more about him, but he was the Grand Dragon.
Yes. And the Pettus Bridge, we've seen it,
yes.
Heard it, that we're familiar. We probably don't know the whole backstory, but it's
that's a little more that's filtered through a little more. It was the site of Bloody Sunday, but the bridge itself was named after the Grand Dragon of the KKK.
And one interesting thing is that while we were filming, the cars that were crossing the bridge would blow their horns, especially when the stoplight happened. They were trying to interfere with us filming. They saw Black people in front of a camera at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And this was just a couple years ago. And the horns would blast. And we thought, they really don't like seeing this. They really don't like people talking about what happened here.
Okay, so let's bring it on home. I'm Terri Wisdom. This is Harlem Network News, and we have one of the filmmakers for the great film Who We Are, A Chronicle of Racism in America. And this is Jeffrey Robinson's film. They're here with us today. And the film is going to premiere tomorrow at the Magic Johnson Theater in Harlem, which is right on the corner of 124th and, quote, 8th Avenue and Frederick Douglass Boulevard. And you can get your tickets. They're going to try to do some free tickets, through some of the organizations, just to get folks in there. There's going to be a talk back. I think it's a very, very vital and important film for all of our community, because we do have so many people that are born way after the time, and our history has really not been documented in that manner. So there's a lot of missing information. And in the spirit of Sankofa, if you don't know where you came from, it's hard to look at where you're going to go. So if you could just share a little bit about what the screening of the film is going to look like, why you chose the the Magic Johnson Theater. I know that you were at the Film Forum, and where it's going to go from there. And is it online?
The film is going to be opening in like 300 theaters across America tomorrow.
Wow.
And our goal is that we want as many Americans as possible to see this. The opening in Harlem is a quote from a famous movie, "For reasons that are all too obvious." This is American history, but this is a history that is centered on our community. And so we want as many people in the community to see it. It's going to be in theaters. At some point, it will be streaming down the road, but we will get that information to folks as it comes up. And I will say Sony Pictures Classics has been a very good partner, and they are doing a lot of work to promote this film. And as a result, that's why you see over 300 screens starting tomorrow all around the country.
Okay, that's incredible. So we're part of Harlem, we're part of a bigger picture.
Sarah and I will be there tomorrow night and Saturday night following the 7:15 shows. And I wanted to say that if anyone is looking for free tickets or group rates, they should please email info@thewhoweareproject.org, and we can help set that up.
Okay. So info at the Who We Are.
Yeah, all one word, thewhoweareproject.org.
thewhoweareproject.org. Okay. So is there a sequel to the film? Because things are happening constantly. What direction? Obviously, history, information, and especially at this time, so much has happened in this COVID time. We have to call it COVID time. Disparities have been like uncovered, just in terms of, we as people of color have always known that there were great disparities, but with COVID, it was way identified, just in terms of the economic problems, in terms of, lack of medical, facilities, or, all of that. The fact that a lot of people of color may have what is called comorbidities, so they would have, be more subject to, getting, a disease just because of their history, which really can get right back to economics. It's also uncovered the fact that a lot of people don't have enough to eat, as well, food insecurity, as well as there being a great educational divide, which is crazy when we think about, those that died and fought for, equal education. And especially in Harlem, the education is separate, but not equal to this day. And then there's now a digital divide, which we saw when everybody had to go online. So if either of you would like to comment about that and how we help to change the paradigm in this kind of environment.
What I will say, and I apologize because I'm gonna have to jump because
we're
thing,
done.
but,
We're getting for closing statements.
Is there something else coming? Absolutely. The partnership between the Who We Are Project and Off-Center Media will continue. There is all kinds of footage we have that we did not use in the film that is going to be used. So we have many more projects that will be coming in the future. And if you go to www.thewhoweareproject.org, you'll get an idea of what we have coming.
Okay. Thank you for taking the time. I know that you're busy. Are you personally going to be at any of the talkbacks here in Harlem?
I'm not going to be able to make the talkbacks in Harlem. I'm about to have a fairly significant surgery, so I'm not going to be able to make it, but I will be there in heart and spirit. I guarantee you that.
Thank you. And like I said, I felt like when you came on, and, as a filmmaker and editor, it's always that I know from Emily, from editing a film, you're looking at the person over and over, you're cutting out the footage, so you kind of feel like you know them, so it's kind of like, as you came on, Jeffrey, because I watched the film and you're so much in it, I feel very connected and familiar.
Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you. And we'll have to see how we can cross-pollinate together. A closing statement, Emily, and then we're all going to go. And
Jeff really has to go. They're starting recording.
Okay. Let's get you off right now.
All right.
And go right ahead, Emily.
I would just say that, me, Sarah, Jeff, our whole team really believes in the power of education. We're idealists, and we really feel like if we can get this information out, a set of straight facts based on primary source materials, which is everything in the film, that we can reach people with open hearts and open minds, and that in order to understand what's going on in society today, we have to look back and we have to have a common understanding of where we all came from. I mean, this country is more divided today than it's ever been. And we think that one of the primary causes of that is this lack of this understanding and this creation myth that we've all been taught and sold that's totally inaccurate. So when you don't understand the history of this country, when you don't understand why we are where we are today, and why things are so difficult, particularly for Black and brown people in this country, you invent reasons for why that is. If you don't understand the true reasons, you can't actually develop solutions that'll solve them. If you think that everything was equal and civil rights were accomplished in the end of the 1960s, and everything since then has been peachy, without understanding the history leading up to that and what's actually happened since then, there's no way to create any systems that are gonna right that wrong. So we really hope that creating this foundational common history we hope that it is a possibility, and that we will get this out there, and that we can actually start to build a better place for all of us together in the future.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of cross-pollination in the future. The Harlem Network News concept is definitely about what you're about, and we realize the power of media and the fact that we can help to change the paradigm by getting information to people. So we thank you so much for what you're doing, and very significant, especially at this time. There's so much going on and things are happening so very quickly. So this kind of work is important. And I hope on the grassroots level, we're going to be able to reach many people, because sometimes the normal promotional challenges just don't reach the people. And unfortunately, the people are often so overwhelmed with society, survival, that it becomes difficult, but it's important. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. And I'm sure that your dad, William Kunstler, is smiling and guiding. And it's great, that you came from that kind of family. So we thank you. So also, we just want to let everyone know that we are going to rebroadcast this great interview at about 8:30 this evening. It will be promoted. We want to make sure, because I know there's a lot of news happening, with President Biden coming to New York today, and also our great Congressman Adriano Espaillat is doing like the State of the Union for our district. So we don't want to bump that. We want everybody to have everything, but Harlem Network News, we keep all of our everything up so that people can access it. So have a great day, and please support, join, and follow Harlem Network News. And thank you, Emily, and say hello to your sister.
I will. Thank you.
And we'll speak. We'll continue the conversation. Thank you.